You light something up at the end of a long day. You feel your shoulders drop. Your thoughts slow down just enough to breathe. It feels personal. It feels modern. But the real answer is far stranger than that. Because the first time a human being got high on weed, there was no lighter, no rolling paper, no couch. There was smoke rising from burning stones inside a wooden chamber, thousands of meters above sea level, somewhere on the edge of the ancient world. You probably assume cannabis use is a relatively recent habit, something tied to the 60s, or maybe ancient hippies in some vague, undefined past. That assumption is comfortable, and it is almost completely wrong. In 2019, a team led by archaeologist Robert Spengler from the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History examined wooden braziers recovered from a high-altitude burial site called Jirzankal Cemetery in the Pamir Mountains of western China. The braziers were scorched, blackened by fire. And inside the charred residue, Spengler's team detected something specific: high concentrations of THC, the psychoactive compound in cannabis. The site dated back roughly 2,500 years. These were not wild, low-potency plants burning by accident. The chemical signature suggested cannabis that had been deliberately selected for higher psychoactive strength. Someone, in a remote mountain valley more than 2,000 years ago, was already choosing stronger plants over weaker ones. Why up there? Why in a tomb? The Pamir Mountains sit along a branch of the ancient Silk Road. Funeral rituals in that region often involved altered states of consciousness, ways of communicating with the dead, ways of marking grief as something larger than ordinary experience. The smoke wasn't recreational in the way you might picture a backyard gathering today. It was ceremonial. It was about crossing a boundary between the living and whatever came after. But the story gets older than that. Long before Jirzankal, pollen records from the Caucasus region show cannabis growing alongside early human settlements as far back as 12,000 years ago. Botanists studying the genetic history of the plant now believe domestication may have begun even earlier than wheat. Before bread, before beer, before most of the crops you'd consider foundational to civilization, humans were already living near cannabis, harvesting it, possibly burning it. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing around 440 BC, described a nomadic people called the Scythians who would throw cannabis seeds and flowers onto heated stones inside small tents, then inhale the vapor that filled the enclosed space. Herodotus wrote that they would shout with joy at the experience. You are looking at one of the earliest written records of a human being intentionally getting high, set down by a historian more than 2,000 years before the word marijuana ever existed. So why does any of this matter to you now? Why does a chemical from a mountain plant produce a feeling your brain recognizes so easily? Here's where the story turns inward, into your own biology. Your body did not evolve a reaction to cannabis by accident. You have an entire signaling network inside your brain and nervous system called the endocannabinoid system. It regulates mood, memory, appetite, pain, and stress response. This system existed in humans and in most other vertebrate animals long before anyone ever burned a cannabis plant. The neuroscientist Ethan Russo, who has spent decades researching cannabinoid pharmacology, has pointed out that THC essentially mimics molecules your own brain already produces naturally. Compounds like anandamide, sometimes nicknamed the body's own internal bliss molecule, bind to the very same receptors that THC activates. Cannabis doesn't introduce something foreign into your nervous system. It borrows a lock your body had already built and turns the key harder than your own biology usually does. Why would evolution build that lock in the first place? Researchers studying the endocannabinoid system suggest it likely evolved to help regulate energy balance, fear responses, and social bonding in early mammals, long before humans existed at all. It helped ancient brains decide what to remember vividly and what to let fade. It helped regulate the line between threat and safety. This is not a small peripheral system tucked away in some forgotten corner of your brain. It is one of the most widespread signaling networks in your entire nervous system, present in regions that control movement, mood, memory, appetite, and even how you process pain. Some researchers have described it as a kind of master regulator, constantly fine-tuning how intensely you feel everything else. You didn't choose to have it. You were born with it already running, quietly, in the background of every emotion you've ever had. Which means the plant didn't create the high. Your nervous system already had the wiring. Cannabis simply found a way to walk through a door your biology left open millions of years before the first seed ever touched a heated stone. Think about what that means for the moment you experience today. When you feel that wave of calm, that loosening in your chest, you are activating a system your ancestors carried with them across the African savanna, long before agriculture, long before cities, long before anyone had a word for high. Archaeobotanist Tengwen Long, who has studied early cannabis domestication across Eurasia, has noted that the plant likely served two purposes simultaneously for ancient peoples: fiber for rope and textiles, and seeds or flowers for their psychoactive and medicinal properties. Early humans weren't choosing between a useful plant and a recreational one. They were managing a single resource that did both jobs at once, the same way you might use coffee for energy and enjoy its taste without separating the two functions in your mind. Over centuries, as cannabis spread along trade routes from Central Asia toward the Middle East, India, Africa, and eventually nearly every inhabited continent, different cultures developed different relationships with the plant. Some used it medicinally to dull pain or calm anxiety. Some used it spiritually, the way the Scythians used it inside their smoke-filled tents. Some simply enjoyed it, the same simple pleasure you might feel reaching for it after a stressful week. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. For most of human history, cannabis was not hidden, criminalized, or stigmatized the way it has been for much of the past century. The intense legal restriction you may have grown up with, the secrecy, the shame some people still attach to it, is a relatively recent chapter layered on top of a much older, much more open relationship between humans and this plant. That shift didn't happen because the science changed. It happened because politics, trade interests, and shifting cultural anxieties in the early 20th century rewrote the meaning of a plant that had been part of daily life on nearly every continent for thousands of years. For the vast majority of the time, humans have known this plant. It was treated the way you might treat a strong herbal remedy or a household staple, rather than something dangerous or shameful. You are living through one of the rare historical windows where laws around cannabis are shifting back towards something closer to how ancient societies treated it. Openly, sometimes ceremonially, sometimes medicinally. Sometimes just for the simple pleasure of altering how an evening feels. Consider how far that openness traveled. In ancient India, cannabis appears in the Atharva Veda, a sacred Sanskrit text composed somewhere between 1500 and 1000 BC, listed among 5 sacred plants believed to relieve anxiety. In ancient China, the physician Hua Tuo, working around the 2nd century AD, is said to have used a cannabis-based compound mixed with wine as an early form of surgical anesthesia. In Africa, archaeological pipes containing cannabis residue have been found at sites in Ethiopia dating back roughly 1,300 years, suggesting the plant had already become woven into daily ritual life long before European colonizers ever encountered it. None of these cultures were copying each other. They were arriving independently at the same basic relationship with the same plant across thousands of miles and thousands of years. That kind of pattern rarely happens by coincidence. It usually happens because something in human biology made the discovery almost inevitable the moment the plant and the person cross paths. And that brings the story back to your own skull, right now, tonight. The researcher Raphael Mechoulam, often called the father of cannabis science, was the first to isolate and identify THC itself back in 1964, working out of the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel. Before Mechoulam's work, nobody fully understood why this particular plant did what it did to the human brain. His research eventually led directly to the discovery of the endocannabinoid system you carry inside you right now, the same regulatory network mentioned earlier, built into your body long before any human ever lit anything on fire. Mechoulam's findings revealed something almost uncomfortable in its simplicity. The high you feel is not the plant doing something foreign to you. It is the plant briefly amplifying a conversation your own neurons were already having with each other every single day, whether you ever touch cannabis or not. So when you think about lighting something up tonight, you are not stepping into some entirely new, modern indulgence invented by a generation looking to rebel. You are stepping into a habit so old it predates written history, so old it may predate agriculture itself, so old that the very mechanism your brain uses to enjoy it was already built into mammals before humans existed as a species. 2,500 years ago, someone in a freezing mountain tomb in western China breathed in smoke from a wooden brazier and felt their mind shift. 2,400 years ago, a nomadic tribe described by a Greek historian shouted with joy inside a smoke-filled tent. 12,000 years ago, plants were already growing beside the earliest human settlements, waiting to be noticed. None of those people knew about receptors. None of them knew about Mechoulam or Spengler or the molecule called anandamide quietly circulating through their own brains. They only knew the feeling, the same loosening in the chest, the same shift in how time seemed to move. The mechanism was invisible to them, but it was already running, the same circuitry you carry today, inherited across more generations than you could ever count by hand. You like to think the high you feel tonight is something private, something entirely yours, born from a modern choice in a modern world. But the real answer is far stranger than that. The feeling was never new, only the lighter is.